Who helped you when you got him out of the grave?
Something. Also just told them they found some more heads up there.
What did you intend to do with their body?
What would you do with the head?
That must have been taken from reading about these magazines and everything. Taking the flesh off like a headhunter.
In the depths of a lonely farmhouse, a man sat in silence, surrounded by lampshades of human skin, skull bowls, and masks of the dead. This was not a nightmare. This was the home of Ed Gein, the real-life inspiration behind Hollywood's most terrifying killers. To the people of Plainfield, a small village in Waushara County, Wisconsin, Ed Gein was mostly a figure that evoked pity, an unmarried, scruffy, and somewhat dim-witted man who spent most of his time in solitude. In his childhood, this unwanted isolation was imposed on him by his strict and religious mother. But even long after his mother's death, Ed continued his self-imposed life of seclusion. His only interactions with the villagers were when he took on repair work for them, or occasionally acted as a babysitter. Ed Gein spent most of his time in his farmhouse, a house that had a reputation among children for being haunted. Of course, when the adults heard about Ed's collection of dried heads and terrifying masks, as well as his naked dances under the moonlight, they would involuntarily laugh because at the time, no one took these stories seriously. People knew that Ed had a strange fascination with horrifying objects, which they assumed he had purchased from toy stores, the kind that sold Halloween supplies in La Crosse. But the truth was revealed on a fateful day in November 1957. It turned out that the children of Plainfield had been right all along. A monster had been living among them. That day, Frank Warden had gone deer hunting and decided to stop by his mother's hardware store on his way, unaware of what awaited him. To his surprise, despite it being the middle of the day, there was no sign of his mother, Bernice. Only when he stepped inside the store did he see a trail of blood leading to the back door. Worried, Frank immediately alerted Sheriff Arthur Schley. Schley rushed to the scene within 10 minutes. Frank told him that his mother had been abducted. He showed the sheriff a sales receipt for half a gallon of antifreeze, the last sale Bernice had recorded before she disappeared. The name on the receipt was Ed Gein. However, the sheriff could not believe that Ed, the quiet, reclusive, and shy man everyone knew, could be involved in an abduction. Still, he had to follow the only lead they had. As dusk fell and darkness began to envelop the village, the sheriff and one of his deputies headed to Ed's farmhouse to question him. But Ed was nowhere to be found. Seeing no other option, they broke down the door and entered his home. The yard and the exterior of the house had already appeared messy and run down, but the inside was in far worse condition, filthy and reeking of decay.
Damn it! What the hell is that smell? Smells like something's rotting. This place is covered in mold. Wait, what's that on the wall? Holy shit! Is that human skin?
Cardboard boxes, cans, and piles of random trash were scattered everywhere. The walls and ceilings were covered in cobwebs, and the furniture was thick with dirt. When they shone their flashlights on the floor, they saw cockroaches scurrying and several rats darting around. The entire house smelled of filth and human waste. Beneath this unbearable stench, there was another odor, a faint yet unmistakable scent of freshly butchered meat. Struggling to keep himself from vomiting, Sheriff Schley hesitantly stepped forward and caught sight of a horrifying scene illuminated by his flashlight. What appeared to be a headless carcass hanging from a meat hook, its abdomen slit open and its internal organs removed. His first thought was that it was a deer, But in reality, what lay before him was the butchered body of Bernice Worden, Frank's mother. Thus began a police investigation that would make Ed Gein's name infamous, not only across America but throughout the world. In the following days, investigators discovered that Bernice's corpse was only the first clue to the unimaginable horrors hidden in Gein's home. To their shock, they found soup bowls made from human skulls, some still containing remnants of the last meal Ed had eaten. There were chairs upholstered with human skin, as well as lampshades and a trash can expertly covered in human flesh. Later, they uncovered a box filled with severed noses. A belt made from human nipples was found, along with a box containing preserved female genitalia. On the walls hung masks crafted from the faces of 9 women, displayed like hunting trophies. Among the gruesome artifacts in Ed's house were wristbands, an apron, and even a vest made from human skin, including the complete torso of a woman. As investigators, stunned and horrified, continued collecting these grotesque relics, one question haunted their minds. How many people had Ed killed to create these macabre souvenirs? Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. His mother, Augusta, was a deeply religious and fanatical woman who preached to Ed and his older brother Henry every day, warning them of divine wrath. Her favorite topic was the depravity of women. In 1914, Augusta concluded that she could no longer endure the sin and corruption of La Crosse. Selling the grocery store she ran with her husband, she purchased a 195-acre farm outside the village of Plainfield and moved her family there. George, Ed's father, was a weak and alcoholic man who had little say in such matters and generally followed his wife's lead in all affairs. Augusta continued her old ways in Plainfield and kept her children completely isolated from the outside world. Ed and Henry were allowed to attend school, but they were not allowed to make friends and had to return to the farm immediately after school. Ed himself showed little interest in the outside world. The only friend he needed was his mother. He was already midway into a fascination, or more accurately, an obsessive dependency on his mother, a dependency that would remain with him for the rest of his life. Another of Ed's interests was in horror books about hunters, cannibals, and Nazi crimes. However, he hid these interests from Augusta, who considered them the work of the devil. Ed's father passed away in 1940, and it seemed that the family did not grieve much for him. With the father's death, more responsibilities fell on Ed and Henry at the farm. In May 1944, Henry died under suspicious circumstances. Ed told the police that he and Henry had separated while putting out a fire in the woods, and later he was unable to find his brother. However, when the flames subsided, Ed easily led the police to Henry's body, which, surprisingly, showed no signs of burns. This incident aroused suspicions, but Henry's death was ultimately ruled an accident. Now, no one stood in Ed's way, and all of his beloved mother's affection was directed solely at him. But Ed's period of happiness was short-lived. In 1945, Augusta suffered a stroke that left her bedridden for a long time. During this period, Ed rarely left her side and was always there for her, sometimes even crawling into bed beside her at night after she had fallen asleep. A few months later, after suffering another stroke, Augusta passed away, leaving Ed utterly shattered. He had lost his only solace and support, and step by step he began to descend further into madness. In Ed Gein's case, madness manifested in the form of necrophilia. He quickly established a routine for himself. By day, he appeared completely normal, someone who even evoked the pity of the simple village folk. He earned a living doing odd jobs, such as babysitting or making repairs for his neighbors. But at night, he became a different person. He would get into his 1949 Ford and drive to the village cemeteries, where he would dig up graves and steal bodies. These nocturnal outings were neither random nor impulsive. Ed carefully scanned local newspapers for obituaries, searching specifically for middle-aged women who resembled his mother. After identifying a suitable corpse, he would exhume the body and take it home, where he would conduct his gruesome experiments. Ed never engaged in sexual acts with any of the bodies, or at least, that is what he claimed. His pleasure lay in flaying the corpses and using human body parts to create household items and clothing. It became clear that, in addition to his grave robberies, Ed had also committed at least 2 murders. His first known murder dated back to the winter of 1945 when he shot Mary Hogan, the owner of a tavern, and took her body back to his farmhouse. Later, during investigations and interviews with villagers, it was revealed that Gein had been infatuated with Hogan, spending hours at her tavern nursing a beer while secretly watching her from the corner of his eye. A mask made from Mary's face was later found in Ed's house, displayed among other grotesque masks on his walls. His second victim was Bernice Worden, whose murder ultimately led to his capture. During interrogations, Ed openly confessed to killing Hogan and Worden, but denied other accusations, insisting that all the body parts found in his house had been taken from graveyards. When police visited the graves that Ed had disturbed, they discovered that the graves were indeed empty. In court, Ed Gein was not convicted of murder. Instead, the judge ruled that he was legally insane and acquitted him of all charges. He was sent to the Central State Hospital in Waupun, Wisconsin, where he remained until his death on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. Ed Gein passed away after battling cancer for a long time. Hospital staff described Ed as a model patient. However, some nurses and hospital employees noted that he had a rather disturbing habit. Whenever a female nurse or staff member was within his sight, he would stare at her for an uncomfortably long time without looking away. The story of Ed Gein's life and his horrific crimes has been the subject of numerous documentaries and books. He also served as the inspiration for several famous fictional characters. Among them is Norman Bates from the novel Psycho by Robert Bloch, which was later adapted into a brilliant film by Alfred Hitchcock. The skin mask worn by Leatherface, the ruthless killer in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, is a clear reference to Ed Gein's terrifying masks. Thomas Harris, another writer, took heavy inspiration from Ed Gein when creating Buffalo Bill, the serial killer in his novel The Silence of the Lambs. This novel was later adapted into an acclaimed film directed by Jonathan Demme in 1991, with Ted Levine playing the role of Buffalo Bill in one of his most memorable performances. If you found this story intriguing and want to dive deeper into the darkest corners of the human mind, make sure to subscribe to Hunter Mind and turn on notifications. There are many more chilling tales to uncover. Stay curious and stay cautious.